Okay.
Live streaming is on.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. I don't know if you're watching this live or not. Let me check YouTube first because I don't trust YouTube, as you know, blah, blah, blah. Yes, because I know when you're watching this, as I repeated. Two things first. One, because you can see this t-shirt is dedicated to Mark, of course, but it's also fitting for another reason because I just knew that Master Kino from Mafalda, el Maestro Kino de Mafalda, has just passed away, ha fallecido. Y I wanted to quiero dedicar quiero dedicar este programa a Kino, que nos ha dado, sorry Mark, I'm going in Spanish, I know you understand. Quiero dedicar este programa al maestro que nos ha dado tantos días, tantas tardes de alegría. I want to dedicate this show to the master who's given us so many days and nights of happiness and of learning with his comics. From that point on, I hate this, but I have to go back to my usual polite public service announcement. Yes? Okay. Let me get ready. Wear your fucking mask. Okay? Wear your mask. It's not about you. This mask doesn't protect you. It protects people from you. I don't care if you're an idiot and you want to die. Kill yourself like the Romans, as I say every day. That's your problem. But you can kill somebody else. Your elders, your kids, your best friends, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, anybody. And that I don't accept. So please wear your mask. And as I always repeat, and I want to repeat again to make it clear, if you don't wear your mask, if you don't want to wear a mask, you think you're Superman, immortal, and you don't care about anybody's lives, fuck you. Leave this channel now. I don't want you here. I don't want murderers in my channel. With that said, in my polite and usual way, hello, Mark. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well, David. Thank you very much for inviting me onto your program.
No, thank you very much for being here. You gotta be masochistic to be here. No, I'm kidding. How's things in your neck of the woods right now? Is everything okay? Is it getting better? Is still madness at every turn?
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid over here things are increasingly sort of getting bad again in terms of what's happening with the pandemic. The new cases, I think, were 7,000 yesterday, and about 67 people passed away. So, it is increasing quite rapidly, and there's been a lot of issues over the government sort of trying to bring in various restrictions, but it being regionalized and them being quite harsh in some areas, and it not making a lot of sense to many of the communities, because in many cases you could just literally, walk for a half a mile and then walk into a pub and go drinking as per normal. Whereas in other areas, like in Bolton, I believe that they're completely shut down with those sort of hospitality venues and things like that. There's a lot of disparity around the country, a lot of confusion, to the point where even our own Prime Minister doesn't quite seem to know the message himself when he was delivering in a speech yesterday. So I'm afraid that's not helping.
Yeah, has he ever known? Let's be honest.
No, well, yeah, and our track and trace system has not been working well. They're trying very hard to sort of push the application for everybody to download on their smartphones now. Hopefully that may help. But I'm afraid everywhere there are problems, and and I think we are now moving into the autumn, and we all knew that this would see a rise in the infection rate again, and more people getting sick. And anyone who thinks that it's over is sadly mistaken. I think we're going to have a tough few months ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And even the Prime Minister himself over here inadvertently blurted out the fact that he expected these the new levels of lockdown that are going to be coming in over the next few months to last 6 months. So, it gives us a little bit of a reality check of what's to come.
Yeah.
So, and I just feel sorry for for everyone. This is a difficult time. It's affecting everyone to greater and lesser extent. So, I don't know about you, but I know people who have passed away due to the virus. So I take it very seriously.
Yeah,
and it upsets me when I see people not following the most basic instructions about taking care of themselves and the others around them. So
yeah, that's why I started doing that stupid thing with the mask almost every day. I think I've been doing it for the last 20-25 days, because I am sick of the idiots. It doesn't take that much effort to just put on the mask, be safe, keep the distance, and be aware that you can be harmful for somebody else. As I said, if it was about yourself, but it's not about yourself, it's about the others. So when I see people so not giving a shit, let's be blunt, about the rest of the people, that's when I get mad. I said, it's not that difficult to be, to have emotions, to not be a sociopath. You know what I mean? Anyway, imagine that I'm your doctor now. My name is Victor Frankenstein, just so you know.
Right.
And I have my syringe, pop it, and I cure the pandemic all over the world. Right now.
Right.
Boom. It's done. And I tell you, right now you can do the thing you've been missing the most for the past few months. What would it be, the first one?
Good question. Probably going to a concert, going to a live gig would be the thing that I'd most look forward to, because that was the thing that I was sort of saddest about seeing end. I mean, I have a lot of friends that are musicians or involved in the music business, and for them, their world just disintegrated in March. And there were friends of mine who were on European tours, suddenly having to sort of race back to the UK country by country, hoping that they can get back before borders were shutting. I have other friends who had a year's worth of work lined up touring with big bands, who suddenly found that all of those tours were cancelled. And they don't have an alternate revenue stream that, for most musicians, it's, live performance is where the majority of their income comes from.
Yeah.
It could, the providing of that experience, and then any merchandise sales that come on the back of that, where people are wanting to take a memento home from the event. That's where the sort of the revenue stream really exists for most people trying to make a living in that line. And the same for everyone that's involved in film and TV and theater, and anything that involves performing in front of an audience is gone. And it's been really difficult for a lot of folk I know, and I find that incredibly sad.
And also governments aren't helping. And I can say also about the government here in Spain, everything that is related to culture, I keep waiting for them to help. Like, these guys are dying. Culture is dying. Live culture. Following what you said, the theater, concerts, even book readings, you cannot do it. So right now that is dying because there's no alternative for them. There's just not. So I keep talking, and I keep hearing them protesting with the governments and saying, we're dying, we need your help. But it seems like banks are more important than culture, and I always say, no, it's not. What is your view about that? Do you think that the government there is trying to help, or is also like here, it looks like they don't know what to do with the culture?
They have provided a lot of support. The furlough scheme was quite generous. They were trying to provide opportunities for grants for businesses, holidays on taxes, reductions in VAT. Various things were undertaken to try and help. But they all had a time limit and they're all ending. And sadly, what we're seeing now is that a lot of businesses that sort of were ticking over because there were potential, opportunities for them to at least just sort of tick by and keep their staff on, are now ending, and they're having to look at the reality of where they now stand, and they're letting people go.
Yeah.
So I think it's sort of just delayed what sadly seems to be quite an inevitable decline and a very large increase in unemployment.
Yeah.
Every
Here
day
we have the governments, the syndicates, and the patronal. The big companies, entrepreneurs, whatever you're going to call it. They made an agreement yesterday to extend the furloughs again, the ERTEs, until at least the end of the year. Right. So we have that. But I was being more specific about cultural. Here they did a lot with the help with that.
Oh, I see.
And all that. But I mean I think they are forgetting about the culture that needs to do live performances. I think that they're not helping enough here. That's why I'm asking if they're doing the same there.
They're not helping enough here at all. That has been a big issue. They were very slow to provide any support. When they did, it was a sort of a large chunk of money that they said, "Oh, this is our sort of fund to help support the arts." But it's a very convoluted business trying to apply for any of that money. I think it's definitely going to be a case that some of the bigger venues will be able to access that support. But I mean, I'm seeing lots of live music venues and small clubs are just going to the wall now because there's no way they can keep going. And certainly this money is not going to be making its way down to individual artists and musicians, and certainly it's not going to be getting to people like makeup artists and lighting people and road crews and all those kind of folk. I don't know how they're going to get through this.
Yes.
And in many cases I'm seeing, a lot of it seems to be funds that are being set up by more well-known creators and performers who are trying to get pots of money together where they can more strategically dish it out to individuals that are really having a rough time at the moment.
Yeah.
I was hearing the other day that Jodie Whittaker and the Doctor Who and a friend of hers have set up a fund and have raised something like £1 million to help people in her business. And there's been things like with Bandcamp have been really supportive of music artists. They've been doing this thing where one day a month they allow the bands to keep all the fees that would normally be paid. They were sort of waiving that side of things so that they could maximize the amount of revenue that they were getting through by doing big promotions on those particular days, things like that. That's the sort of things that are kind of helping performers and people in these creative industries to sort of keep going. The government money really isn't going far enough.
Yeah.
And I am very concerned because I think at the moment, lots of events are being sort of rescheduled and pushed further down the line. But every time they do that, a couple of months later, and we realize, actually, think more like a year from now, think beyond that.
Yeah.
I have friends of mine who've been very honestly saying to me, I don't think we're going to get anything like normality till 2022, and I think they're probably right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly, with in terms of my, taking part in public events. I mean, I very quickly realised that this was not going to be a year for conventions and signings and public events. Partly because it was not convenient to travel a lot of the time, and restrictions were changing constantly. So you could agree to go somewhere and then find that either you weren't welcome or you were having to quarantine for 2 weeks when you got back. Mm-hmm. I also didn't like the idea of, and wasn't really concerned about my own health, but I really didn't like the idea of being at an event that, that my presence might encourage other people to leave their homes and go to a big, busy public event where they could put themselves at risk. That was the thing that was scaring me the most. The last thing I would want is for anyone who related to them to suffer as a result of of going somewhere just to get a few books signed and to say hello. I mean, I'd much rather, in this current climate, be doing things like this, talking to you, where people can access it from the safety of their own home. I'll wave and say hello, everyone, and it's the same as a convention experience. Honestly, it's fine. It's all good. I don't get to sell any prints or sign any books, but I think we can all avoid that for a year and not be too sad. I think.
Yeah, and many creators have told me the same thing. That they don't miss conventions. What they miss is seeing their friends at the conventions. Like you haven't seen this creator in 6 months or a year, so suddenly you see him at dinner and you sit down for like 6 hours and non-stop talking.
Yeah.
That's what I miss, honestly. I don't miss the signing part, but also they tell me the same thing. Like, I don't want to be the guy who causes to put people at risk.
Yeah.
No, if they're coming to see me because I come from the UK or from America or Argentina or whatever, people is going to go to that show where there is going to have a lot of people, even with the restrictions, and I'm going to be one of the causes that could make it risky for them to leave the house.
Yeah.
So that I don't want that to happen.
Yes.
Do you remember the last time you went to the theater to watch a movie?
Oh, actually, well, yes. And it wasn't even for me, really. I took Alex to see Frozen 2 when it came out. My little girl Alex to see Frozen 2. She's quite a committed fan of Frozen.
Same here. But in my case, Paloma took her. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I think Alex ended up going twice. She went once with us as a family, along with some friends of ours with their children, and then another time Irma took Alex again on her own, just because she was really enjoying the film. And I think it was just one of those typical sort of rainy weekend days where it was like, well, what can we do? We can't really go to the playground, so we went to the cinema. But no, I haven't. I can't remember the last film I went to see. Probably a Marvel movie, probably Avengers Endgame. Now I think of it, I can't remember if I've seen anything since then.
No, I'm asking because it's happening a lot that I'm asking people here on this show the last movie they went to a theater to watch, and the answer 99% of the times is I can't remember. It's like we've moved to a different plane, to a black hole, and we're in the other side of the universe. And it's like, no, it's 3 months ago, and I can't remember it. So it's really weird. That's why I was asking you.
Oh no, I mean, yes, the last few months have been so strange, because I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people felt rather lost in all of this, because we tend to structure our lives based on the things that we build into our schedules. The drinks with friends, the film we're going to see, the theatre show we're going to, the last concert we went to. Those things mark out our months. And they're usually the things that we fixate on. It's like, what did I do in May? Oh, yes, I saw such and such, and I did this, and then I went for the weekend to somewhere or other. And those events are the things that you rely on. I mean, like, for example, this year, I mean, there's 2 weddings that I was supposed to be going to, one in March and one in April, and both of them sadly were cancelled, and are now hoping to reschedule for next year. But things like that would have been key moments in my year that I would have pointed to as, that's what I've done this year. And I did find it hard, even though I'm used to working from home. It was the idea of being trapped and not feeling safe going out and doing other things. Kind of took away the magic in a funny way, that I feel when I'm in my space and I'm surrounded by my things and I'm doing the stuff I love. And suddenly, Irma was having to work from home. Alex couldn't go to nursery, so she was home all the time. So suddenly it involved rearranging the house so that we could both work from home, rearranging things so that the house functioned as a playroom and fun place for Alex to be at the same time, having to restructure how you use your time in the day. so I mean, certainly the first couple of months of lockdown, my ability to be creative just evaporated.
Yeah, just I wanted to ask you about that, because
Yeah.
in some cases I'm getting people telling me that they've overworked because of the lockdown. Is they not even realizing it. By the end of the day, just looking at the page and saying, "Crap! I've done my work, more work than I should, or than I am used to, because I'm just in lockdown." And you lose track of time, as you said. You look those references, and other people have been telling me that exactly the opposite. It's like, I can't work. I just can't work because everything is so confusing that I can't. So how was it for you?
Both. I've done both. I think at the moment I'm more into the being very productive, but over agonizing and pouring too much into everything I do. And that's come on the back of having had, as I say, 2 or 3 months where I struggled and didn't feel able to do much, even though I was one of the fortunate ones that still had a packed schedule of work to be done. And I think the fact that the industry sort of ground to a halt, that Diamond shut down, that DC's printers shut down, that all of the publishers had to send their people home, and many editors that I was working with were being furloughed. Some publishers were asking people to put down their pencils and stop. It was a really strange time, and I found that hard to deal with, because I really wasn't certain where we were going in the midst of all that, and I started to get very anxious about, our business is a very fragile one anyway, the comic business, and most retailers, they get by month to month. They rely on the product being there, the support that they get from the readers that are coming in and picking up their piles every week. That's what keeps the ball rolling and keeps everyone in business. And I think there was a genuine fear that with that kind of rolling to a sudden halt, the whole thing could start falling away, and that model would just cease to function. I mean, it was a genuine fear in my case, that with what impact is this going to have? And I think the fact that there were lots of other factors in the mix, like DC changing distribution, and a lot of sort of question marks about what the structure of the business is at this point, because the big mainstream companies, Marvel, DC, they used to dominate, and now they only represent about 10% of the comic market. If you look at the reality,
if you look at reality out of the diamond charts, exactly.
And so it is changing, and the sales through bookshops and online retail is very significant. The fact that so many people are just doing it on their own now, and using Kickstarters, and releasing things digitally, and then going straight to collections and that sort of thing. That the model is changing all the time. So it's going to be interesting to see where we end up, and quite how all of this sort of settles.
And there's something very, very, very curious that I'm seeing. I keep seeing new number ones from Image, getting the highest numbers Image has in years, and then suddenly popped in my head like last week, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. If you're Diamond, you've lost half of your revenue, more or less, which is DC, and you don't want to die.
No,
Marvel is not going to be able to cover it. Marvel should have to publish twice the stuff they're doing to cover that, and they're not going to do it, mostly because how Marvel is structured, and secondly because they don't have the money, or they can pull it off, whatever. But you have Image there. You can say, I'm going to push that because I need to cover that side of the market, and this is my second best choice. So if this means, and I think it's meaning that Diamond has to push for the Image books, which are creator-owned books 99% of the time, this is going to be a good thing, because this is going to do with their own distribution with a new thing. Diamond is going to be forced. It's being forced to push for other companies
Yeah.
to grow, which are mainly not only DC, not only DC, sorry, not only Image, IDW, although they have licenses, Dark Horse, although they have licenses, Boom, also although they have licenses, they're mostly based on creator own.
Yeah.
So I think that I hope and I think that in the long run, it's going to be really good for creator own comics, because Diamond needs to cover that. They need to make money from something else, and Valiant is not strong enough. No, Valiant cannot be the option where Diamond goes and says another company-owned, company filled with company-owned characters. This is what I'm pushed for, because Valiant doesn't have the structure to publish that much.
Yeah.
Who has the structure to publish 30, 45, 50 books a month? Image. So I think that's their only choice, right?
I think at this point it makes sense to me that Diamond would push Image Books and other kind of publishers that are doing creator-owned material. Dark Horse, I'm sure, have benefited, or I hope they'll be benefiting from this. And Boom and Ahoy and all these, all the
Ahoy,
EW, all the myriad other publishers out there that are doing stuff. I'm sure there is some benefit to having more attention, and I think, funnily enough, in the market that we're in now, I think a lot of stuff is personality driven. It's social media driven. People need to react more quickly. There are more autobiographical books out there. There's more personal stories, and there's more kind of richness and diversity in all aspects of that term, which allows for the fact that everybody who has an interest in reading stories in comic book form, they can find something for them.
Yes.
And the internet allows them to find it in a way that we never could reach an audience with very personal work before.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult when that's not the model that you operate within. If when you're coming from a world that was very different 20 years ago, it's hard to fathom how you adapt to that and how you target an audience in that environment. It's a very complicated time, and I couldn't even begin to give advice on how to steer through this for anyone, really.
Yeah, but I remember when I asked, I was talking about this with Lee Bermejo, and he was telling me, as a creator, and some other people have told me to, and I think you're going to understand it perfectly well, especially because, of how your career has been all these years until now. He was telling me, look, before this happened, you look at that hill, you have a hill in front of you, which is going creator own, and leaving, the big two, and you are like, that hill scares me because I don't know what's going to be behind that.
Yeah.
There's a precipice, I could die. But by the end of the conversation, he said, gotta be honest, the more and more this is happening, the more attractive the hill looks to me.
Yes.
Because it's a lot of creators are telling me that if I don't take the risk now, when comics are open so much, as you said, there's a comic for everyone, and people is reacting, and Raina Tegelmeier, Noel Stevenson, all those books are selling close to 1 million copies in the real world, in the real market, not in the direct market.
Yeah.
This is what a lot of people is saying. If I'm gonna take it, I have to take the risk now.
Yeah, of course.
I have to change. I have to move with the market before the market has changed, eaten me alive because I didn't react on time.
Yeah, no, I understand.
How do you see that?
I agree. I mean, I share that concern. And certainly it was something that was clear to me when Fables was wrapping up. I'd gone through a very productive phase where I'd been juggling about 3 different books a month, where I'd been working on Fables. I'd been doing the Dead Boy Detective series as well. And on top of that, I'd been writing Fairest. So it was, and it was all DC books, and it was all Vertigo. And and I was loving all of it. I mean, all of these books have their challenges, but I mean, it was a very productive and exciting time. But I burnt out a lot by the end of it, and you know, when we finished that Fables 150, that pretty much had burnt out every last bit of creative ability I think I had at that point. And you know, and we were trying to get things sort of moving on Miracleman, and then that hit a sort of a hiccup, and we ended up losing a couple of years where we weren't really able to do anything on that, and that's fixed now. But the problem is that really threw me. But I think because I was in the process of becoming a father at that point, and Alex arrived, I didn't really take full advantage of the opportunity to do other stuff and to take that leap, because I was too preoccupied with everything else that was happening in life. And I think the weird thing is, I think I'd sort of fallen off a creative cliff, really, and I just didn't quite know where I was going. So I kind of steered a little bit away from comics for a while, and I was doing a lot of illustration work and album cover artwork and things like that, you know, sort of exploring other avenues and book jackets and that sort of thing, just, you know, wanting to be a painter for a while and do other stuff. And that's been really productive and really satisfying, and that side of things has improved a lot for me over the last few years. But you know, now that I'm sort of up and running again properly with comic book work, the problem is that all the projects that I've currently got on, I mean, they're big projects for major publishers, so it's not. And they're all, everything that I'm working on right now has resonance. It's not me just doing a few issues of a mainstream superhero character or something like that. They're books that resonate with an audience and have a very loyal readership. So I know that in a funny way, those books, even though they're mainstream, or they're with major publishers, they're still, if you like, indicative of my personal brand. And I know that the people that like those books value my part in them.
Yes.
Beyond, oh, you draw, you know, Super Squirrel or whatever it might be. You know, there is a connection beyond the relationship with the character. I mean, that was something I always found really odd a few years back when I was doing sort of more mainstream superhero stuff, where I'd be doing sort of Batman or Gen X with Chris or things like that. Or Doctor Strange, those sorts of books, or Titans, and I'd have people come by the table to see me at shows, and they'd say, "Oh, I really love this book," and I was, "Oh, thanks very much." You know, I'll be signing some issues, and they say, "So when are you going to do another Marvel book, or when are you going to do another DC book, or when are you going to do some more Batman?" And they were that specific.
Yeah,
we like you when you draw the thing we like. And they didn't really have any connection with the other stuff that I do. They didn't seem to sort of see the fuller picture of me and my creative career. Yes. Whereas from my point of view, I always follow specific creators. If somebody does something that I really like, and then they're logged in my head, and if their name crops up anywhere, that's, you know, I go check it out.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference, is that I'm kind of, I've always been much more driven to follow particular creators, because there's something about their work that excites or inspires me. So that idea of being wedded to something because of the character, I don't really get to the same extent.
I think it's a much more American thing that is European. I can call you European still, because, you know, your Brexit hasn't happened yet. No, I'm kidding.
Okay. Some people will hate me, some people love me. I was one of those annoying Remainers, and I really did not want us to leave the EU, and I remain convinced that a few years from now, a lot of the people that were adamant that we needed to leave will realize that it really isn't.
No, it's not a good idea. And what your prime minister is trying to do now, which is going against what he signed himself, that's going to be a lot of problem for the UK. A lot.
It will be, and I think that's the problem, is that every step down the line, things get more extreme and more severe in terms of the outcome for where we're going as a country. And yet, if you trace back all of these things a year or two previous, the same people were saying, oh, that would never happen, and it's all going to be fine, and this will be great. And then they do the terrible thing they said would never happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's really grinding me down at this point, is the fact that, especially for me as someone who has a huge number of friends across Europe, who's married to a Spanish lady, who, to me, I was European. I mean, I had been for pretty much the entirety of my life, and was very happy about it.
Yeah.
And I liked the fact that we had that ability to be able to explore other parts of Europe without any worries, to choose to live and to love and to marry and be in another country, to seek opportunities to educate yourself or explore another culture. And I don't understand why people didn't value that and didn't appreciate it. And
I think that's the same that they have in America. The exceptional. We are exceptional. We're different. We are an island. We're better. We're different. We're better. Which is something that I always find stupid, because it's like, no, that doesn't make you better. Being a part of a bigger whole makes you better. The bigger we are, the better we become.
Well, I think
whatever, you can become a part of the future United Kingdom of Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, and then leave England and say you're on your own. The rest are Europe. You don't want to be Europe. You're on your own.
I think the reality is, the more you travel, the more you get to meet people.
Absolutely.
The more you realize that the differences between us are inconsequential, and that borders really don't mean anything.
Just look at it from space, and just look at it from space.
Yeah.
And tell me where the borders are.
Yeah.
There is no borders. That's us.
And speaking of looking at the Earth from space, I think that's the thing, is that we have bigger problems to face.
Yes.
Right now, and these sorts of arguments that seem wedded to a world that A, never existed, and B, is built on a rose-tinted nostalgia. They're not going to get us anywhere 5-10 years from now if all our forests are on fire and the ice caps have melted and all our seas are full of plastic and biodiversity is a memory.
Yeah.
That's what scares me. I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I worry about the world that she's going to be living in.
Same thing. Erin is 6, as you know, and we are exactly in the same situation. It's just about the world we're living for our children.
Yeah.
But let's go back to what we were talking about.
Sorry. No.
We were both ranting. It's fine. As I said, this is free willing. We're talking about it was me who be off subject, in fact. We're talking about people that wants you in a character. And I'm saying that's something it's a lot more American than is European in a way. Because here we are a lot more, we've always been pointing to what that creator does. Doesn't matter what book it is. We just want to see his work or her work. There is about the characters. And that's something that, companies use. They know the important thing for many fans is Batman. It's not who does Batman. It's the character. So people is going to ask you, when are you going to do my character? It's not mine, but it's like football, football fans who root, my team, the Tottenham. It's like, your team?
Yeah.
Do they pay you? No, it's not your team. You're a fan. You root for them, but stop saying it's your team. Same thing with the characters. Like, I want you to do Batman because it's my character. No, it's not. You should root for the creator if you like his work or her work, because that will make him or her bigger. And by the other day, the bigger the creator is, the more control you guys have, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I would not put anybody down for having a fondness for a particular line.
Absolutely. That was
having a particular favorite character. If that's the way they choose to enjoy their comics, that's great.
Yeah.
Please carry on. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, I had very limited experience of DC comics as a kid, because the only comics I used to find in my local comic shop were imports of Marvel titles, and also we had Marvel UK, which meant that I was actually seeing black and white reprints of all the classic 60s Marvel series weekly, released in my own comic shop, that I could access and buy in order and enjoy the stories properly. Whereas the problem is, back then, most American comics coming into the UK were just ballast in ships to kind of make up the weight with other shipments, and there was no control over what was coming through. It would just be random batches of things. So I'd pick up issue 3 of Eternals, was one of the very first American comics that I brought and loved, and I never saw another issue of that. I got that one, and then that was the last time I ever saw it, until I discovered my first comic book store, which was Forever People in my home city of Bristol. A friend of mine said, "Oh, there's a shop that just sells comics." What? And, dragging my poor parents to the car. "You have to take me. I have to see this." And of course, it's that funny thing is that you're a teenage kid, and I think it was before I'd actually got my first paper round or any sort of income beyond my pocket money. So it's that idea of walking into this shop and seeing like every comic book in the or what felt like every comic book in the universe was there on display, and looking at a few coins in my hand and thinking, I can afford 2. and sort of really having to think very hard about how I spent that money. That was, that sort of experience is sort of priceless. I can't remember the point I was making when I went off on that tangent.
No, we were talking about characters and creators, of course, about the appreciation which they share. You can love a character too. It's not only loving a creator.
Yeah, but that was the point. Is that it was only back then Marvel was a big deal for me, and I really, any opportunity I had to read especially Kirby or Ditko were big, favorites of mine. Herb Trimpe with, on Hulk, things like that. I would gravitate towards those things. I only really discovered DC Comics and a lot of the other, books that were out there and other publishers that were out there once I started having access to a comic book store. Yeah. But back then there weren't that many. I mean, there was, just a handful around the entire country. So, it is interesting that you sort of, what you experience is what matters to you in those early days. And again, with the UK comics, I mean, once 2000 AD came along, I was fiercely devoted to that. I could understand people. So when are you doing a strip in 2000 AD? That would have made sense to me back then.
I also think that, I don't know if you agree, but I think that for a lot of you guys that later became creators or were creators at the beginning of it, 2000 AD changed everything. It was like, now we have our own venue in our own country to express ourselves as creators, right? As comic creators.
Yes. No, it made a big difference, and certainly the artists that were working on that series on 2000 AD in the 70s then kind of begat my generation. We saw all of that stuff and were inspired by it and wanted to create those kind of stories. We liked the the anarchy. We liked the imagination of it. The fact that everything was episodic on a weekly basis meant that it was constantly changing, and new things would arrive that you really wouldn't expect. And you'd go from Invasion 1999 with sort of the Volgan army coming in, or you'd have, Shaco, the polar bear with a bomb in his stomach and things like that. And then the next thing you know, you'd be getting something like Kev O'Neill doing Nemesis or something, which would just be like out of this complete universe. It's like never seen anything like that before. That stuff was making our imaginations pop, and I think that was what really fired up the British kind of comic book creative scene, certainly for my generation. But what was also useful, because we also had that concurrent placement of Marvel books on our newsagent shelves all through that same period. What happened is that we kind of understood American comics and took on some aspects of that into the mix. So when DC Comics kind of came to the UK, once they'd found Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons and Brian Bolland and they sort of in Kevin, and they'd started to use those talents in the States. It was like, oh, we want more. And there was, my generation sitting there saying, hey, we want to do that too. Yes. So yeah, and I think that was helpful also, because 2000 AD then, because there was that flow of talent from that into the American market. It meant that we're constantly opening up new opportunities for other creators to come in and fill the void. So we had an incredibly healthy scene just because of that. So it was a good moment. It was a good moment.
I always find funny that a lot of people didn't realize when Epic released Martial Law, they didn't put it together. They didn't realize Pat and Kevin were also British, and they thought, it just was mostly ignored by most people. And then I was talking to Garth, ECC just did a new edition, an omnibus edition of all Martial Law, and people was telling, well, this is in a lot of ways is similar to Garth. And I told them, go to Garth and his interview in this channel, and you will see how he mentions Pat Mills and Martial Law as his main influence.
Well, Martial Law started as a strip in a UK newsstand comic called Toxic, in little weekly 5-page episodic chunks. And that was, that's a really good proving ground for an idea.
Yeah.
If you capture people's imagination and interest in just a handful of pages, then you've got something worthwhile. I think it's one of the things that I find a little bit disappointing with the way things have gone to a certain extent with storytelling in the comics market now, is because there's this move more and more towards creating novel length kind of stories. Everything's designed for the trade or the collection, or just going straight into a graphic novel format. The problem is I find sometimes that a good idea gets stretched too far, and a lot of the comics that mean the most to me are like 60s Marvel with Stan and Jack, where every issue of a comic was 17 pages of a tale.
Yeah,
would have a very defined beginning, middle, and end, would throw in new elements, would take you to strange new places, and it was constant. I mean, they were chomping through great ideas and great characters and great plot developments month by month by month, and you really had that sense of momentum and that things were changing and developing all the time. And I certainly with my own plans for doing more creator-owned work in the future, I would rather be in that model.
Yeah.
I with the projects that I'm developing, I'm purposefully throwing a ton of stuff in, and it's like, what? If I use up all my ideas in one volume, it doesn't matter if it's a good volume.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the way I'm sort of approaching it, and we'll see what happens.
It's also about you were just saying about with the way comics storytelling has changed. Sometimes I miss the use of many of the best tools comics have. For example, I keep saying in many comics, where's the silent moment? Where's the moment when we need to reflect? Where's that page where we just see the expressions, the emotions, the body language that tells us everything? Because everything has to be filled with words because it has so much information we have to, because we have to get to 6 issues in a trade to tell a whole novel. And you're like, sometimes you just have to step back and let the artist tell the story with no words.
Well, yeah, no, yes. It's a balance. All of these things are a balance. And I mean, certainly I personally am more in favor of nuance and gesture and emotion and conveying things with more subtlety. And I think that's probably because of the background that I came from with the Vertigo books, with working with people like Neil and Pete Milligan and Grant and people like that. They build in breathing space, and they do let the story tell itself, if you know what I mean. They don't force it.
Yeah, they don't push.
I mean, they're all capable of writing incredible prose, but they don't overuse it. And I think
no, they I think you mean that they don't push it, they just let it flow, right?
Yeah.
Rick.
And also there is that element, as you say, about trusting in your artist and your collaborators. Certainly with Neil, I remember on the second Death series where I ended up sort of jumping in after Chris to do the second half. The way we were working together was basically Neil would just send me dialogue and then we'd have a chat. And it was all about, the beats were really important. The pauses were vital. But he never forced his hand in terms of dictating the structure. He kind of relied on me to connect with the words and understand where those characters were going. And I think that's really useful and very positive in terms of storytelling. You have to rely a little bit on the artist.
Yeah, because that's also many times when I see writers who don't, let's be honest, they don't really care who the artist is. They just write their own block of stuff, and then doesn't matter. Just, this is my stuff. This is the structure. You have to follow it to the T. You can't change anything. Many times to the writers, that kind of writers, and I'm not going to name names, guys. Here, this is private stuff. I've told them to their face, "Do you realize you're doing comics, right? Because if you want to write a novel, just go write a novel. This is not a novel. This is comics." And comics depend on the artist and depends on you trusting the artist. It's a synergy. If there's no synergy between artist and writer, the script and the art, the comic doesn't work. Just doesn't work. You realize it as a reader, and I think it's the same to you as a reader, and also as a professional. You go past page 1 and you already know this is not working.
Yeah. I tell you what I was looking at the other day that I became very conscious of this. I was looking at a lot of Mike Mignola work. I'm a huge fan of Mike's. And I was looking through one of those big library editions of Hellboy. And I was just reading it and suddenly realizing how considered and how sparse a lot of the dialogue is. He really, if a scene doesn't need it, there's no dialogue. Or you could hit a couple of pages where there might be one or two little exchanges in the whole thing, but he allows it to breathe, and there's time to take in the environment and to just kind of drift with it, not to sort of feel this necessity that they're not saying anything. Therefore, there's nothing happening. That's really not what it's about. So that was interesting. I've been reading a lot, looking a lot of Toppy as well. of late, and I was noticing the same with his work. There's a lot of room to breathe. There are many pages where there's only 2 or 3 word balloons.
Yeah.
But what's being conveyed in the art tells you 10 times more. And I think that's hugely important.
That's for me what's when I realized I don't remember who I was talking about this the other day, but I was telling the moment I realized how much I love Frank Miller was when he did the switch in Electrolives Again.
Right.
Where you can see exactly what you just said. Is the moment he realizes as a writer, because he was right before in Daredevil, of course, but as a writer, he realizes, I don't need to feel everything with words. I am going to let the art to speak for itself. And I guess, having Lynn, of course, helped a lot because of the subtleties he added on with the painted colors.
Right.
But that moment when he realized that as a creator, I don't need to tell everything to the reader. I just need to let them see it. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the maturity as an artist and as a creator. I mean, let me ask you this. It's also trusting your reader because you can manipulate him. You can, I always say, comics joke, I have to say it's in every show. I have to repeat the same phrase. I believe comics is the only art form that can defy the theory of relativity because comics control time and space from the first panel to the last. You can have it 20 pages happening at the same second or moving back and forth. And Watchmen, as I always say, is the perfect example. And it's the only art that can do that because, movies force you to follow the flow. Novels, you have to follow the flow. But comics, you can do it in the other way. But what I mean that in this case is many times the maturity of a creator, in my opinion, is when you realize you can trust your reader, that they're going to fill in the gaps, that they know more than you do because they've been reading forever. Do you think that too?
Well, I certainly trust readers, and I think the thing is though, I mean, you control a certain amount, but you don't control it all. You give the reader the tools to understand and to experience your story.
But I'll go with the contradiction of what I just said because it has a contradiction on itself. But please continue.
But at the same time, every reader reads the book in their own way.
There you go.
You have your own environment. Some people devour books in a few seconds and then maybe go back and mull over things with more time later on. I'm a bit more of the take your time, kind of try and take in a bit more of the art as I'm reading the balloons. But then having said that, I also tend to scan through books a lot and just drift with the art and then go back and reread it again. I think everybody's approach is different. So you can't guarantee. You try to tell the reader where the eye is supposed to go. You have an idea of the speed at which that's going to happen, but you can't trust the reader to stick to that.
That's what I was going to say, because
they want to go and they're going to read the balloons that they want to read, and you just have to hope that they will engage with it and enjoy it in the way that works for them.
That's what I was going to say about the contradiction, because you can control time and space, blah blah blah, but also at the same time, comics is the art that forces us as creators. The reader needs to get involved. If you don't get the reader involved, doesn't matter how much you manipulate. It doesn't matter at all. They are the ones who choose how fast or slow they're going to turn the page. Or as you just said, if they go back and forth, if they go to page 5 to find this character was here and now she's here. Oh, this is happening at the same time. You gotta get them involved. So you gotta be a manipulator at the same time, right? You have to put them in. You really need to read this. You have to do that to them, right?
I don't know. I don't know. I have no dictation to other people as to how they experience my books. It's their choice, and they do it the way they want.
But I mean, even if it's not conscious on your part, you are creating something, of course, that you want people to read.
Of course. Yeah.
So the way you do it is you have to think, I want to get them involved, because
Yeah.
if you don't get involved, as I said, a movie is just this. You just let it go. But in this case, and also in novels, I guess, you got to stay with the page. It's, page one, I don't care. I have to stay with the book. So there's a manipulation element, whether you like it or not, where you have to push them to stay, right?
Yes, that's true. I mean, I put a lot of thought into the structure and the layout and the way in which I would hope that their eye would cross the page and how they will experience it. And you do make conscious decisions about how you place things. Just even simple things like shadows and stuff like that can change the way your eye crosses a page. So you have to take so much into account. And I think that's one of the reasons why sometimes I find the final stage of the process harder work than the design and storytelling side. Because for me, that's the bit I'm really into, and I invest a lot of time in getting that bit right.
Yeah.
And then there's a bit of me that just thinks, oh, okay, well the job's done now. And then it's like, oh no, hang on a minute, that's just a layout. They actually need to finish this.
I guess because the layout part is the most creative in a way, right? And then it's become not insult to inks at all, but the inks are more mechanical because you've already designed the page in a way, and then you get to the ink, which is just the finishes, right?
Even tightening pencils, though, is
live streaming is on.
Oh, good, we're back.
Where were we? Sorry, again.
Yeah, no, I was saying that I actually quite. I find even the sort of tightening up the pencils ish side.
Yeah.
And I guess it's because I don't really think of myself as an illustrator. I just think of myself as a storyteller. So that's I suppose that's where I feel my shortcoming is. But at the same time, I do like inking because inking was something that for a while was the primary thing that I was doing in the business.
Yeah.
And I really embraced and loved that craft. And I suppose one of the things I do like about inking is that you can actually occupy your mind with other stuff while you work, because a lot more of that is based on instinct and sort of just, what you can trust in yourself in terms of line weights and placements of blacks and all of that sort of thing. So I quite enjoy when I get to that point, but there's a bit in the middle that's always a little bit more of a fight. But I've never been one of those people who's been able to kind of eliminate the mid bits.
Yeah, you don't go from the layout to the ink. You have to tighten the pencil.
Yeah, I've always needed to have a very strong foundation before I want to sort of risk that side of things. And I think it's because I have quite a clean style. If I was a little bit more kind of fluid and then maybe a little bit more messy, then I could probably get away with it more, because that would become part of that process. But it is what it is.
Yeah, but if you were talking about the process, let me ask you this: when you're working, you need sound, you need cacophony around, you need absolute silence. It depends on the stage. Some creators have told me layouts is complete silence because I'm designing the page and I have to have complete concentration. Then when I go to tighten pencils, something, maybe a TV show that I've already watched in the back or something like that, or music but then when I go to inks, I just go crazy. So how is it for you?
Similar. With writing, I prefer silence or to be somewhere that's kind of fairly neutral. So I like to, sadly not anymore, but I always used to love writing best when I was traveling. So, an awful lot of the Fairest volume that I wrote was actually done on aeroplanes.
I was going to say, I love writing on planes for whatever reason too.
Yeah, and and a fair bit of the co-plotting writing of stuff on Miracleman that I'm doing at the moment with Neil, that's a lot of that has actually ended up being done in sort of hotel rooms or en route to places. because there's something about not being at home, of being on the move, that somehow your mind is also free and traveling as well.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And I find that incredibly liberating, and I and obviously if I'm trying to come up with, working on ideas for stories of my own, I tend to need to get away in order for that to really sort of kick into gear. Yeah. And actually, because I'm also sort of singing and songwriting a fair bit these days as well, and I find the same with songwriting. Most of my ideas come when I'm out for a walk, and I always end up sort of voice memoing melodies and lyrics, and then sort of trying to make sense of it later on. So that's kind of my norm with that. With the layouts, yeah, I mean, silence is preferable because there's a lot of processing work going on, because you're reading scripts, you're thinking about it, but it's not just the words, it's the structure, it's the flow, it's the placement of the characters in each scene, because you've got to think about not just what's happening in one panel, you've got to think about where those characters are going and who's going to be leading most of the conversation from page 1 to whenever it ends. So that's something that really requires concentration and space. Once I'm beyond that and I'm laying out pages, I can put radio on or music on, and that's fine. And then, yeah, as you say, once I'm into sort of full body sort of penciling, all sorts of things can be sort of babbling away in the background, and I'm fine. Once I'm really certain of where it's going, it's easier. And with inking, it could be, I could have TV on and all sorts of things and people around, and I would just not worry about it.
Yeah, well.
I mean, I used to be better at multitasking, with work and doing other stuff. I remember one time being on a signing convention. I remember it must have been a signing tour. And I was with David Lloyd and Mark Bourne, a French artist, and he also had a podcast that he was doing, like a radio show thing that he was doing, where he was interviewing creators. So I had this situation where it was the evening. I was in a bar. I was chatting with David. I was doing the interview with Mark. And I was drawing pencils for Fables with a beer in my hand and a pencil in the other. But it worked, and it was fine, and it was all good stuff. And I think I used to be a lot better at sort of not being more relaxed about that side of things. These days, I'm a little bit more anxious, and I tend to sort of need a bit more space to sort of really get lost in things. And I think that's also probably because it's a changed environment now, with having a child to worry about. They tend to be a much stronger thief of your time and your concentration. And I find that I can't multitask when I'm with her, and then when I come to my office, there's a kind of I have to flick a switch in my head to sort of get me back to where I need to be, and it's not instant. I do need to connect with the muse. I do need to find
absolutely
where I was before in order to be able to work. So I've found that I've drifted back to doing a lot of night work again. I find that once everybody else is sort of done for the night and we've all had dinner and Alex is asleep, that's the point at which I really feel the need to be in my office again, because I know it's dark outside. I'm in my little bubble here, surrounded by my things. I can put a bit of music on or something and just get lost in it for 3 hours or 4 hours. And that's really useful time. And I will get a lot done because I can just throw myself into it. So.
Yeah, for me, it's after they have gone to bed, I usually just go to the forest we have really close with the dog, to walk for an hour, and that's putting all my ideas in order and cleaning my head, and all my creativity comes back, so I can calm down, sit down on my desk, like after midnight and work for 3-4 more hours.
Yeah.
But I need that hour, complete disconnection of just walking around, because if not, yeah, as you said, they occupy a lot of your of your mind bubble or something.
Mm.
And then when you're done with it, they're like, okay, now I need to concentrate again. I need air.
Mm.
What is the most special thing for you as a storyteller in the language of comics? What makes it so special, so unique compared to other arts?
Right. Oh, I guess it's just the sheer.
I told you could end up insulting me.
No, I guess it's just the sheer flexibility of it. The fact that you can go from moments of absolute insanity and chaos and surrealism into something incredibly grounded and realistic with genuine emotion, often within the same page.
Yeah.
If I mean, a lot depends on the level of talent of the person creating, of course. But I think I like the fact that flexibility is there. I love the control. I love the intimacy of comics.
Mm-hmm.
I like the fact that before I sort of went into doing comic books full time, I spent a little while working in animation at Aardman, and I really loved it. And they were a small studio at the time. There was only half a dozen people full time, and various other folk that would come in for different projects.
Mm-hmm.
So I liked it, and it felt like you were part of a little team, and you could point to what you'd done and feel like you could own your bit of the process.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really the case with animation usually. Especially these days, they're huge teams of people. Everybody's specialized in tiny little aspects of the job. And I was a bit worried that I'd get lost in it,
Mm-hmm.
that I wouldn't really find my place. And that if I wasn't kind of at the top end where I was actually in designing the characters, writing the stories, kind of, taking that sort of major role in the production, I didn't know if I'd get the same value from it, and also it's really slow. It takes a very long time to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
And comics were instant. And I think that was the thing that really resonated with me, is that, it was reliant on you. It was very personal because it was you creating your interpretation of the world,
Mm-hmm.
a very unique vision that would then be consumed by individuals in an equally personal way. And I think that was the thing right from the outset that I kind of understood and valued and cherished, was that, no, this is a little bit special, and I can find my own voice eventually. For a long time I didn't know who I was or what I was trying to do, but I felt that it was possible to develop and find a way of communicating with an audience that was direct and personal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what appealed to me the most about comics as a storytelling medium.
Yeah,
beyond the benefits and the structures of the nature of comics themselves, because people do, I think, engage with and absorb information and experiences from comics more deeply than they do from most other forms of communication as well. I think there's something about that combination of words and images that just, it is one stage of the process of the way that we assess the world when we're using our eyes and our brains that we're doing for you.
That's
which
also
makes it really easy to absorb and understand, and to fully get lost in and immersed in. And that always resonated with me. That always felt something special.
I think that there's a couple of things that I could add there that I think that I believe are part of what you just said. One is we are made of from the caves since the times of the caves. We are a species made out of pattern recognition, which is rustle something in the bushes. Maybe there's an animal there that's going to kill me.
Right.
So comics is in a big way the first storytelling in the caves. What we saw in Lascaux or Altamira. For me, that's storytelling because the guy has 6 arrows or 4 legs. They're trying to tell a story. And you have to fill in the gaps. And comics are really that. You don't need to fill all the spaces or draw all the heads because people is going to interpret. They recognize the pattern. And also, as you just said, I think it's something really special with our ability to read what happens between the panels. I think that makes us as comics readers. My second joke that I do every day is it gives us a superpower. Because we always read between the lines much better than anybody else. Because we teach from a very young age to find and understand what we don't see.
Yes. I can understand that.
We have to cover that space. It's Superman and then he's flying. And the rest is us.
Yeah.
So when I'm reading a newspaper or something, I always say, I was taught by comics. I learned thanks to comics. To not take anything for granted, to just try to find what's between the lines.
Right.
Do you agree with that, or am I going too far?
I do think there is huge value to the way that comics teaches you to acquire information and to understand it and process it. And I think that it is completely undervalued in terms of its educational value.
Yeah.
And really, comic forms of storytelling and information development really ought to be embraced in education far more, because I think that they just and in the workplace too.
Yeah.
I think if most companies' manuals were in a graphic novel form instead of sheets and sheets of paper that they had to read through, I'm sure most people would know completely how the business works after a weekend, because they have the visual clues and they're absorbing it in a narrative way, and it would just people latch onto stories. People will engage with a tale.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that really isn't appreciated and valued.
Yeah,
that's babbling.
That's one of the main reasons I'm doing this, because in times like this channel, in times like this, when we're seeing corporations doing their thing, they're corporations, they do their thing, they value what they value. I always say I need to strike back in my own small way, which is I need people to value the creators, to know them as people, and to know there's somebody behind, and also talk about the language as I do. As you see, I go crazy with my references and the relation with that, because I think comics are a symphony and they are math in the end.
Right.
I put them along with music. I think that storytelling in comics is like doing a symphony. And that's also math. That's why I always say arts and sciences are more related than many people think, and that's what they will call schools of arts and sciences, in the classic world. And I think that it should be valued that way. The complexity of the comics language should be in the same category as we talk about the symphony and as we talk about, as I was saying, as math, because it has that.
Yeah.
Even if we don't realize it, it's math and it's a symphony, right? So. Then let me ask you this before we go with people's questions. So, guys,
there are questions, are there?
Of course, there are questions.
No.
and a lot of nice comments for you.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Do I get to see the comments, or is
if you watch YouTube, If you
No,
go,
I'm actually just watching you on the screen.
no, okay. If you watch,
Never mind.
you go to the. I will read them all to you. Don't worry. I won't hide anything from you.
Okay.
The thing is, what I was going to say? Yes, when you get on a plot, you think about a plot, or even if you are only drawing, instinctively, what do you go for first? Structure or emotion? I thought you were going to hate me.
No, I find it hard to separate the two. I mean, that's. I think there is certainly an element of which structure has to come pretty early on in the process, because you are assessing the space that you're working within. There is whether you like it or not, a comic book has a structure, and it dictates a flow, and you need to think about where the beats are going to hit. So, I mean, I always have the emotional beat points of the story very clear in my mind, and I will structure to maximize the impact of those moments when we hit them. But the nuances of that emotional moment will come after I'm certain that the way you get to that point will work, and then I can get into the subtleties of that.
So in a way, you structure it so you can get the most out of the way you show the emotion.
Yes.
So one thing takes you to the other.
Yeah, I don't. They're not divisible.
See,
as far as I'm concerned,
see why I said it's like a symphony.
Yeah.
You need to structure it to get the emotion out of the person who's listening to that music. So I think it's the same thing. You have to prepare that flow so it booms at the moment you want that emotion to be effective for the reader, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let me see. Let's go with people. Felipe Ebrel says, hello, everyone. Kyle Rayner reviews. Rest in peace, the Master Kino. Yes. Greetings from Argentina. Jose Pin, good afternoon. Paula Ventimiglia, yes, it's a sad day. Chris Perkins, hi all. Pedro de Mercader, hello, everyone. Pedro de Mercader says, how did you remember your brief days in Artman? In Artman. Yes, he just said before. Is anything you learned working there has been useful for you to create comics?
Yes. My time at Aardman was incredibly valuable. I learned a lot actually about pacing and storytelling from watching them animate. And the way they would set up scenes, because one of the things that was nice about the time that I was there is that I had a fairly kind of fluid role, because I was just sort of a technical assistant, but I was also kind of a runner and set model maker and that sort of thing. I was an assistant animator, with background characters. I would also help with like video assist with the filming and stuff like that. So I kind of learned a lot of skills, and I experienced a lot of different aspects of the process, which all fed into doing the comic book work. But also, I mean, the thing with me is that right from the outset, I was always a very keen model maker, especially clay model maker, as well as being keen on comic books, and the two went hand in hand all the way through my youth. And so I was able to also pick up a lot of tips and help on the model making side of things as well. And I still build models to help me with my comic book work. I mean, especially if there's a monster or something a bit more fanciful that I need to draw in a multitude of different poses, I will try to sort of build one. So I'll show you examples. If you just bear with me for 1 second.
Because we want to see it, right?
Right. So jumping into my little cupboard there. Right. So, for example, for those of you who are Fables fans and remember the Homeland story arc with Boy Blue, these are the two ogres that he meets in the first issue, which I actually, produced little models of so that I could draw them in a variety of different poses during the story. This is the sort of stuff I do a lot. Maybe not as much as I used to, but I do find it helpful. There was also an album cover. I'll show you. We've reached that point in the day where I start bouncing up and down a lot to show you things. There's a friend of mine, Chris Opperman, a brilliant American composer, has just released his new album called Chamber Music from Hell, and he asked me to do the artwork for that. And again, it was a sort of bizarre landscape with sorry about the
nice yes.
There were these strange sort of AI constructions, and basically with all of those I built 3D models of the basic forms, which are then photographed, and then on top of that I would layer in the bits of musical instrument and the technology elements that would sort of flesh them out. That sort of stuff I do a lot of still. And actually with the with Miracleman, with the covers for the Golden Age and for the ones that I've been doing for the Silver Age, there were always sort of three-dimensional elements. So I don't know if you can tell, but for example, the logo here and some of these other parts are sort of built in. Wow. They're not just drawn. And, and certainly with some of the earlier covers, they got incredibly elaborate because I was actually doing full-on 3D constructions, like with the alien Morse on the cover of issue 3. He has a Hessian gown, and it was a 3D, I built a model of his mask and everything. So, things like that. And issue 6's alternate cover, which also was the collection cover, that was a set of doors that open up, and they were all actual dollhouse doors. Wow. Built into the art, and some of them were open a little bit and others were open fully, and within each of them there'd then be a little either a physical object like a person climbing out, or there'll be flowers, or there'll be little drawings in some of them. But that sort of stuff to me is really exciting. Any opportunity I get to sort of be playful and mix media is a huge delight.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. How much fun that has to be for you? You know, just crazy. I can go crazy with the covers and do essentially whatever I want.
Yeah. So I mean, that's that sort of stuff I really like to do, and it was the same with some of the album cover artwork that I've done for some of the bands as well. Another example. Hang on.
People love this. So,
so this, for example, was something I did quite a while ago now, about 4 years ago. Was an album cover of a band called The Gift, which was Why the Sea is Salt, and it basically I did this sort of three-dimensional model of the main figure that was then built into a painting of a sea crashing sort of on the rocks background. So I mean, things like that.
That's beautiful.
I love to do. I mean, some of these pieces are enormous. I mean, they're big as the drawing board, but it just it gives me a lot of satisfaction to change not just the mediums I work in, but the parameters within which I work as well. I've really struggled to work digitally. I've always been about physical materials, about dirty fingers and getting into that art. Yeah. For me, if I get to the end of the day penciling and I'm absolutely covered in graphite, that's a good day. I like the mucky aspect of it and the physicality, and certainly and in terms of proportions, I love the fact that I can go from doing something like that cover I just showed you, that's A2, down to sometimes drawing pages that are more or less publication size, and in each case it's what the piece needs from me. Yeah, dictates the format in which I make it. So
yeah, in many cases, I guess that the piece itself, when you start thumbnailing it, tells you what you're going to need, right? This is going to push you in a direction or another, like what you just said. Go really big and do that thing, or go small. It's telling you need to do it in this way, right?
Yeah, I mean, it also depends on the medium I'm using. So, for example, I found that early on when I started introducing washes into my work, so for example, on the Doctor Who stuff that I was doing for IDW, I found that working more or less publication, A4, just a tiny bit above the publication size, worked better for me because I had more confidence with the washes at that scale.
Yeah.
And I did some Madame Xanadu covers, and they were the same. They were all not far off publication size, but it's because at that scale, I felt like
you have more control over it, right?
Yeah. And it was only really when I did the final issue of Fables that my confidence in that medium was sufficient that I could go back to doing sort of full size boards, and it felt like the balance was there now, and I kind of knew how to control it.
And it was also the last issue, so you just said, you know what, let's just do it.
Well, I do have this tendency to, if it's possible for me to make a job more difficult than it needs to be, I invariably do.
Well, you're an artist. You're an artist. You guys do that. You guys, it's the way to be an artist is, how can I make it more difficult for myself? Right?
And yet, funnily enough, at the same time, I'm always striving to simplify and clean my work to kind of get back. There's a part of me that wants to be Alex Toth, and there's another part of me that wants to be Sergio Topi, and I can't find a mid ground. And another bit of me wants to be John J. Muth, and occasionally I want to be Dave McKean, and it's just like, I'm all over the place. The problem is that, there's a bit of me that wants to go in every possible direction, but at the same time I'm trying to find my own voice, and it's a battle between all these competing possibilities, and then where your actual strengths lie as an individual, and sort of finding that path.
But I think it's also a nice battle because it allows you to, as you just said, tackle every different project in a different way. Doctor Who, I know, is A4 washes. I know those Miracleman covers need to be bigger, and I need to incorporate, the stuff that I create for it. And some other projects are going to be more straightforward, comic technique. So that constant struggle, or wanting to be four guys at the same time, to say it another way, it also pushes you to try different things on your project. And makes it more entertaining for you, more fun, because if not, maybe it could just be boring because you could be doing the same thing over and over again, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even within Fables, I went through a significant number of reevaluations and changes from arc to arc, because every time we started a new story arc, it was like, well, changing environments, different characters getting involved. It gives me an opportunity to sort of tweak things and try things in a different way. And I think in those early days, I also from time to time would pick on a particular character and think, okay, new story, you're the character that I'm not quite sure I like the way you're looking, or the way I'm kind of handling the drawing of you. I'm going to have a bit of a rethink here and see what I can do to sort of refine this one. And it's interesting. I mean, there were characters that I hated in the early days who then became favorites of mine, usually just before we killed them. It seemed to be always the case that Prince Charming's a classic one. I always used to be a bit reticent about drawing him until we got to his final arc. And then it was like, oh no, I don't want to do this to him now. But anyway.
You fall in love right before you kill them.
Yeah.
Good one. Okay, Pedro El Mercader says how it was redesigning and making more contemporary the classic fairy tale character for Fables. Which character was for you harder to recreate?
Oh gosh. That's a good question. I mean, I mean, it's tricky because, quite a few of them Bill had sort of put his mark on early on, because Bill, being an artist as well as a writer, when we started the project, he'd already kind of written his little Bill's Bible of Fables. So he had, a drawing of most of the key characters, of how he envisaged them, with King Cole and Snow and Bigby and Bluebeard, and who were the other ones that Boy Blue he'd already drawn. So that was kind of done, and Prince Charming he'd already had a crack at, and some of the others. And he'd also provided little maps and plans, like this is the layout of Bullfinch Street, and things like that he would do, and this is how the lobby is set out, and it was very useful, actually. But that was one of the reasons, funnily enough, why I think I gravitated towards doing Animal Farm, the second volume, instead of agreeing to do the murder mystery story at the start, because I thought, well, this is more uncharted territory, and also it's more things I want to draw. It was all organic environments. I could basically design the farm any way I suited, because Bill hadn't come up with anything for that yet, and I knew that I'd be populating it with fantasy characters and animals. And the only people I'd have to draw most of the time was the two pretty girls, with Snow and Rose. And I thought, well, that seems like a fairly comfortable job. I think I'm going to enjoy this. And it was tricky, because it took about 3 months before they found Lan to draw the first volume. And at the time I was drawing Spider-Man for Marvel. So I didn't think I'd actually be available for more than one story arc, if I'm honest. I didn't back then. I thought I was only going to be part of a team of revolving artists. It was much more intended to be the Sandman model, with a different creator coming in each story. And it was only because I had so much fun on Animal Farm that I kind of upset the plan, and immediately went running back to Bill and Shelley saying, I want more. Can I please be my book?
It's mine.
It's my book now, yeah. So, and it was strange. I mean, Lan and I were designing stuff simultaneously. So he was working on issue 1 while I was doing issue 6. And that's the way we kind of did it in those first volumes. So that we'd each see each other's work. So if somebody was drawing something in one that had to be referenced in the other, we had access to all of those things. After that was when I started to sort of reimagine them all. I mean, certainly the characters I had the most fun with were probably Pinocchio and Boy Blue and Flycatcher early on, because those were the ones that I really felt like I jumped on and stamped them with my own identity very early on. And then after that, it was a gradual process of going through the rest of the book and sort of seeing where I kind of found my particular take on them all. I'm trying to think if there was something in particular that I'm trying to think what else I can say to answer the question. Sorry, I'm fine. At this point. We'll move on.
The second part of the question was, which character was harder to recreate?
Oh, harder? Well, I don't know. I mean, I found Baba Yaga tricky because Mike Mignola had done her in Hellboy, very shortly beforehand, and I really liked his version, so I kind of wasn't quite sure where to go with mine. And luckily, Bill had sent me some children's story pages from a Russian children's book of the Baba Yaga story, and that helped because I could kind of weave some of that into the mix, but it still had a bit of Mike's version in there. I kind of the problem is, if I like something too much, it's very hard to jettison it from the back of your mind. If you're not looking at it, it's kind of talking to you. So just trying to think now. If there was anything in particular that I can't think of anyone really.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. Javier Messon says, "Hello, congratulations on your work. I wanted to know when the new Miracleman story you're drawing is going to be published. Thank you."
Yes, it will be.
That's fine.
I'll be honest, I don't know what the schedule is right now for when those new stories are coming out, but I can promise you I have been working on them. And Neil and I have been meeting up to discuss the plots and to work on the scripts. And, you know, I've got beyond the sort of the tricky bit, which was me trying to go back to what we'd been doing when it all kind of came crashing to a halt originally with Eclipse. Because the problem is the Silver Age we'd started and we had a couple of issues out and a third one that was sort of in the drawer waiting to happen, but never quite completed. And back then we were in a weird place with Miracleman where Eclipse was kind of starting to get into trouble. The book was coming out occasionally. I mean, we were lucky if we got more than one out a year. And that was also partly because we tended to sort of wait for them to get paid.
Well, yeah.
And then we'd start the next one, which is a terrible thing to have to confess, but back then every penny counted. And also, you know, the problem is that I was doing other work in between issues of Miracleman back then, and I would always, you know, everything that I do, my style would change.
Mhm.
I'd be working with different people, I'd pick up different influences, or I'd try working in a different way. So the problem is those three issues of the Silver Age all looked quite different from each other, and that was never the intention. You know, the Golden Age was all about short stories in different styles. The Silver Age was supposed to be one continuous narrative that needed to be really solid and on point. So what I needed to do was kind of come back to this, and I'd ask politely if I could kind of go over those early issues again and try and sort of find a way to make it more consistent, which basically ended up involving me trying to redraw them all from scratch, which, because we had a few occasions where everything ground to a halt, every time I came back to it, I didn't like where I left it. So the reality is that I have like multiple versions of issues 1, 2, and 3 in different styles and different formats. And it took a long time for me to sort of finally settle and feel like, okay, this is how it's going to be, and this is how everybody's going to look, and this is it now. So that's done, you know, and so those early issues have all been redrawn, and we're now into the thick of new plots, new scripts, and new art, you know, new issues. So it's all chugging along, and it will be coming out, I'm sure, in the new year, but I just couldn't tell you when. And obviously, you know, the way things are at the moment, everything that happened with the pandemic has not done any of us any favors, and schedules on most books are not quite where they were meant to be. So, you know, we'll see what happens. But no, I am working on it. I'm really happy and very proud of what Neil and I are doing on the new stuff. So I think it's going to be great, and it will come soon.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Felipe Brea, Mark has talked about his ability early on to draw in a similar style to other artists. Was it natural, or he had to develop it over time? Has his own style overtaken that now?
Okay. I've never lost the thing of wanting to work in different styles. I take great pleasure in forcing myself to work in different ways and to try different things. It's what makes being an artist satisfying and something that I'm able to feel confident to keep doing, because I need to change, and I need to try new things in order to feel happy in myself creatively. Back then it was always there. I hadn't really pinned down a clear style. Part of it was fear. When I started out, I kind of thought that I wasn't really cut out to be a serious kind of adventure superhero type artist. I thought that I was best suited to doing things that were more cartoony and fun. And a lot of my early work was, I did a stint as a illustrator for a satire magazine in the UK, and I was doing, newspaper illustrations and things like that. And I thought that was my route, but it was because I did a strip for Heartbreak Hotel, a little 4-page strip called Wild Side of Life, that was much more in keeping with Miracleman. Stylistically, it was reminiscent of Alan and Gary, and it had a main character that looked like they were floating and had a Tinkerbell effect. And Neil saw this, and basically said to me, I'm looking, Alan's just offered me Miracleman, I'm looking for an artist, this is perfect. And it forced me to have to rethink, because I hadn't really imagined that was the route I was going to take. And we went through a lot of phases then with me sort of trying to develop my work in that direction. And eventually I ended up as an inker on Hellblazer as a way of getting some experience in mainstream comics. And so I learned a lot from working with Richard Rayner, but that was a very different style to mine, but it was technically amazing. So the skill set I acquired on that was terrific. And then I worked as a penciler on Hellblazer, but I was matched with Alfredo Alcala, who completely transformed my work, so it became something else again. And then in the meantime, I was trying to figure out how I was going to draw Miracleman. And I had sketchbooks full of stuff in a multitude of different styles. I was just doing, white crayon on black paper. I was doing little oil painting things. I was doing cartoony stuff. I was doing very serious stuff. I was doing German expressionist kind of blocky forms and that sort of thing. And I was showing this stuff to Neil, and Neil basically said, stop trying to have a style. We're going to do this for the golden age. We're going to, every issue, different style, different format, different structure. This is going to be our thing that will make it distinctive from what was being done by Alan and John in the previous arc. So it became a virtue, and that's what we kind of ran with. But the problem is, once I was down that route, actually trying to find a style of my own became more and more difficult, because my thing was not having a style. But to be fair, in the early years of my career, it paid off, because I was easily transposable into any book, because wherever you put me, I could do something that fitted, and I could collaborate with other artists, and I would just say, well, okay, what I think and what I do is irrelevant. How do I make that artist be the best that they can be? Or how can I make this story be the best version of this comic that it ought to be, and not worry about artificially putting a stamp on it just to be able to say I was there. So it was, that was, and I've tried to hang on to that. And I mean, with Fables, that's probably the one time in my career where I spent long enough on one thing that it has a distinctive look. And most people, I think, at this point to that as being, well, that's Mark Buckingham. That's what Mark's stuff looks like. Sorry, I need water.
No, but I think that could apply to your Spider-Man run with Paul. That was really personal, and I think that let me know if you agree that your sensibilities and Paul's sensibilities were a match made in heaven for that book.
We gelled instantly, and it was. I have to say, I mean, I have a wonderful relationship working with Bill. I think that Neil Gaiman brings out the best in me as well, and has always pushed me to my limits. But I think the period working with Paul was probably the most natural and harmonious collaboration I've ever had, and we both still have a huge affection for that time and what we achieved on that book. And I mean, as is often the case with me, I came into it a little bit more tentative and being more reverential and referencing other artists' kind of interpretations of the character. But after a while, it settled, and I found my voice, and I found our way of doing the book, and it really worked well. But and I was gifted. I had very nice inkers on that as well.
It was wonderful work, and that's one.
When you have a great collaborative team around you, it gives you the confidence to be able to just get lost in your own part of the process and to take pleasure in that. And that was, again, one of the things that makes Fables so special for me. Is it wasn't just how nice it was working with Bill and how great his scripts were. It was the fact that Steve Lealoha is one of the nicest guys and best inkers in the business, and a brilliant artist in his own right. That we had people like Lee Luffridge on the color, that we always could rely on Todd Klein to do a beautiful job on the lettering, and Shelley looking after us all editorially. It was a family, and it was I always sort of make that analogy that we were a bit like a really good band, that we all knew our place and we all played together, and it just worked. And you didn't have to question each other. You didn't have to glance at each other to see if you were all in time. We just were. And I think that that's very special, and it doesn't happen often.
No.
But when it does, you have to appreciate it and value it, which is why I never left. It was like, I don't want to be the guy that breaks up the bands. This is something special, and I'm in it for the long haul.
I don't want to be John Lennon. Okay. Philippe Bell says, I remember both Forever People shops in Bristol. I was shocked to find them gone.
Yeah, I think the sad thing is that they, the one that used to be on Park Street, the sort of final incarnation, they were forced out in the end due to high rent charges for that location in the city. And I think that's a common problem for a lot of really wonderful businesses, is that often they will just be, forced to find more and more money to remain in their spot, and it's not always possible to keep going.
Yeah, corporations, we hate corporations. I'm kidding, corporations, we love you. No, I'm not kidding. Anyway, Felipe González Hernández, hello Mark, I love your art and your writing. Fables was one of the best comic books, and your pencils are superb.
Oh, thank you.
Do you want to write more comic book, or more comic books, create your own ones? I enjoyed your Fables arc and Dead Detectives. Now I need to read.
No, yeah, okay. I certainly want to do more creator-owned work, because I have, to be honest with you, done hardly any. I've always been fortunate that I've been given great jobs to do with amazing writers at big companies, and most of the time it's been quite personal works, things like Sandman and Fables and things like that. They're not your run-of-the-mill book. They're something that connects with people and builds a brand new audience, and I value that. And I would like to do the same with some projects of my own, but at the same time, if I have more opportunities to work with people like Bill and Neil, I always find it very hard to say no, because I know how satisfying and how pleasurable that's going to be, and I also know that there's an audience that's going to be appreciative of it. So, it's going to be tricky to make that leap, but I know I will. I mean, at the moment, I'm sort of working towards it in a more considered and quiet way, in that I'm sort of building a website. I've been working on prints, and and a few little art books and things like that I want to start putting out there, so that I begin to build a more direct relationship with the readership, with the audience for my work, in the hope that I then sort of prep them for me actually throwing new stories at them that are a bit more substantial. So I think that's my sort of long-term plan over the next couple of years. And certainly, once Miracleman and the other couple of big projects that I've got lined up for next year are done, that would be my hope, is that I can then sort of invest a little bit more time in some of those stories of my own.
It'll happen. Let's hope so. Sadly Beer. Hi, Mark. Your work in Fables is amazing. Congrats. What are your favorite artists and writers?
Oh, gosh. Well, we've covered a few in the chat, but I am a huge fan of Jack Kirby. He has been a significant influence on me, and certainly, in the early 2000s, that was the thing that changed me, was that I rediscovered how dynamic and how powerful his pencils were, and basically reconsidered my approach to drawing based on that. But beyond that, I have an admiration for so many different artists. It's hard to kind of think who specifically to say. And many of them are artists that you wouldn't spot their influence in my work, but they just connect with me and talk to me. So John J. Muth is one, Bill Sienkiewicz is another one, Alex Toth I already mentioned, Joe Kubert's work, who else? Let me think. Who else? Alan Davis was a huge influence on me early on, and I think that was, not just because of Miracleman, Captain Britain, but just the fact that his style was so versatile. He had this ability to make everything feel like it belonged, and everything had this bounce and energy that I love. There's a lightness of touch with Alan's stuff that's very special. Magnolia, as I said. Let me think who else. John Tottleburn. Gosh, yeah, I'm on the spot now. The hundreds of them will come to me after we finish talking.
Yes,
those all come immediately to mind. And what was it? Was that the full extent of the question, or did I miss a bit?
No, you didn't miss a bit. It's fine.
Okay.
It's fine. Well, he also asked favorite writers.
Lots of people that I've already worked with.
Yeah, because the names we just mentioned, you have Bill, you have Paul Jenkins. Like, well,
and
who did you have in Hellraiser?
That was Jamie Delano.
And you have Jamie, so
another amazing writer. Pete Milligan on Shade. I had Grant Morrison on Invisibles. I've been very fortunate that I've worked with peers who are also heroes of mine. If you know what I mean, I've been very lucky that most of my working relationships have been a little bit special, and the sort of dream jobs that most people would kind of long for have been the staples of my career. So I do not ever question how fortunate I've been to be in all those right places at the right time. And it is, sadly, with careers, you survive through talent and reliability, but actually getting those breaks is so much of it is based just on meeting the right editor or being in the right place where you have that drink with that person who says, oh, actually, I like your work. We should do something together sometime, that leads to that amazing job that you would never otherwise have got to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and there's plenty of people I would love to work with where it just hasn't quite happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'd love to work with Kieran Gillen, but it hasn't quite happened yet. I'd like to work with Al Ewing, hasn't quite happened yet. Cy Spurrier, another one that at some point we must do something together. And dozens more. I mean, I just, and there are other artists where, I mean, especially on something like Dead Boys, where Dead Boy Detectives, where I had the opportunity to bring in other artists to work with me. In some cases, it was people that are old friends that I know I can rely on and I love their work. So Victor Santos, I made sure that he was part of that, both on the short, the short stories and on the end of the series. Russ Braun is another one who's, I really wanted to get him on board because he really helped with that book. And Emma Vicelli, who's an amazing artist and a friend of mine, I was determined to get her first break at DC and got her in on the final issue of that. If those opportunities are there, I will take them. I like collaborating with others, and it's for me. It's part of the pleasure of this business is that it does give you that chance to combine your skills with other people and see where it takes you.
Yeah. The synergy that we mentioned before. Hi, Mark, your work on the Death series.
Yes.
With Gaiman and Bachalo, I don't know how you pronounce it, made a huge impact on me as a teen reader. Can you share any stories and insights about the project?
Oh,
you have to start saying a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was very special to me too. I certainly think that I really engaged with Chris's work. I mean, funny enough, they'd sent me some samples of his, both from Shade and the first, a couple of pages from his first issue, to have a crack at inking. And I think I'm not sure if they were considering me for possibly one or other, not necessarily specifically for Death. But I loved his work, and there was, inking him just felt so natural. I felt that there was at that particular stage in his career that we seemed to be on similar paths. And Neil always used to say that I kind of consumed my collaborators. If I found someone whose work I really liked, I would eat up as much of their style and approach as I could, try and learn all their little tricks. And in the case of Chris, it kind of went to the extreme in that I sort of ended up at the end of Death being the sort of, Chris Bachalo's stunt double. I could go, need Chris for a book, but he's busy. I go, let me do it. And that kind of became the thing. And I loved working with him. I always felt completely at home working on his stuff. And I only stopped because I'd reached a point where I heard her for a couple of minutes, but not anymore.
Okay.
Sorry, we're back. So I only left because
you needed to get away, right, to find your own voice.
Yeah, and it was one of those cases where a friend of mine, Scott Peterson at DC Comics, had offered me an opportunity to have a contract to do Batman as a penciler. And it was one of those situations where it's like, if I'm ever going to really focus on finding my own voice in this business, and focusing on my own work, I'm going to have to go for this. But it was hard because we worked really, Chris and I worked really well together, and I did love, I followed him to Marvel, to Ghost Rider 2099, and to the Gen X book. And all of them were a pleasure. So, but Death in particular, just I think I just really loved the character, and I loved Chris's interpretation in many ways, I can't quite see. Death doesn't seem quite right to me if it's not relatively close to his interpretation.
Absolutely, I completely agree. For me, it's not real.
Yeah.
If it's not like as close as possible to his
Mhm.
interpretation, yes.
I mean, and I really liked. It was trying to think. Was it Mike Zuley who drew the original, or was it? Hang on, I'm losing track of who drew the original story.
I think it was Sully. Yeah, I'm not sure.
But
Yeah.
or was it Dringenberg? I can't remember. Anyway, the point is, I liked that version of the character a lot, and she had that youth and that pixie quality that I really love. And I think the one time I can tell that an artist doesn't get death is when they suddenly become older and voluptuous and a woman.
Yes.
And it's like, no, you really don't get it. This is a girl. This is a slight, delicate, sweet-natured girl.
Yes.
Who's still young and is still developing, and for her, the world is bright and new and exciting, even though she's been here from the start and she'll be there at the end.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't get that, then it's really hard to draw her. I think there's always an aspect to which some artists have slightly more of a cookie-cutter approach to how they draw characters, and they just think in terms of costume, but they don't really think about the person within.
Yeah.
So it's tricky. It's tricky. I mean, and I hold my hand up and say, when it's the other way around and I'm doing superhero books, I struggle, and because it's not natural for me, and I find it really hard to put my stamp on those characters, because it's, my tendency is always to try and make everybody a little bit too natural, and my superhero costumes have folds and and need to be pulled up because they. Anyway, that's just me.
Let me see. Rick Pepinillo.
Mm-hmm.
Ricardo Pickle. Rick Pepinillo. He sings on Generation X over Bachalo's pencil is outstanding. Bachalo never looked better.
Oh,
you're an amazing penciler, inker, and person.
Oh, that's very sweet. Thank you. Everybody's being very kind.
Because you deserve it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
People gets kindness because they deserve it. Assholes don't get it. You get it because you deserve it. Okay. Facundo Ezequiel. Do you see any clear direction to where, this is a difficult one, to where mainstream comics should go to save itself from disaster? Wow.
Well, I think save itself from disaster might be slightly over.
Yeah.
over egging it.
Facundo, just a second. Just so you know, Facundo, comic sales over Borough, however you're gonna call it, have grown a lot in the last year. So please check the numbers. Please check the book scan. We are not in danger. The sales have gone up, especially not only in the direct market, but as we were saying before, in the book market, sales have grown a lot. So we are not that close to disaster. Sorry, Mark. Go.
No, I think the big publishers just need to, as much as possible, be flexible and to sort of just be aware of what's happening in the industry beyond that, in order to sort of really see where they need to go and where their place is within it. But I would never give any specific advice, because I don't know their businesses well enough to be able to tell them what will work and what won't. I don't have a business head. I'm not really aware of what's at stake and what the pitfalls and requirements are. But what I do know is that it's always tougher to react and to adapt and to change when you're a big company. And the problem for DC and Marvel in both cases is they're not just big companies themselves, they're part of monolithic corporations that, you know, have structures that don't relate to the comics business at all. So I think, you know, it requires a lot of consideration and a lot of careful planning and a lot of willingness to be flexible in order to make the best of the years that are coming. But what that is, I couldn't tell you what they need to do. You know, I think it's important that they try to value the contributions of the people that have been working for those companies and the breadth of knowledge and understanding of the business that's been built up. That's one of the reasons why, you know, it worries me when companies go through huge changes, because you think, well, you know, you're losing a lot of understanding about this business, and it's, you know, I mean, we're not groceries. We're not, you know, we're a business that requires sensitivity and a light touch and a lot of care and a lot of understanding of the audience and what they get from it and how they experience and appreciate the books that are produced. And you need to take all of those elements on board when you're making changes and you're developing product and you're trying to talk to that audience. So it's about stepping lightly and knowing that the steps that you're taking are going to land where you need them to. Anyway, sorry.
No, makes perfect sense. So you have a life to go back to. I heard voices behind voices here, so family's probably around, so you need to go back to them.
That's fine. Is there anything else we should talk about before we go?
No, there's questions. I went through the questions, but I have one last question for you myself.
Fire away.
Then I will let you go back to your life.
Okay.
Get rid of me. Before you retire, if you ever retire, and I don't think you will, is there a story that you've been dying to tell that you keep reminding yourself, saying, I'm not going to retire or die or whatever, or becoming mortal? I don't care. I'm not going to stop until I tell the story?
Well, I guess at one point I would have probably have said Miracleman, actually, the Silver Age and Dark Ages of that, just because, you know, when that originally stopped, it had quite a negative impact on me as a creator, because I was so invested in the series and in my working relationship with Neil. So there was a level on which, when Miracleman stopped suddenly, it was a little bit like a bereavement. I didn't quite know how to cope with it. And I went through several years where I struggled to find my feet. That's one of the reasons why I became such a regular inker on books, was because I wasn't, when you feel the rug's taken out from under you, it's very hard to be creative.
Yeah.
So you fall back on instinct and craft.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what I did. It took a long time to get back to a point where I had more confidence in myself. And to be honest with you, it wasn't until I was, you know, reasonable way into Fables that was the first point where I started to think, okay, if Miracleman never happens, I'd probably be okay with that now. But for a long time, I was hanging on to this desperate wish that somehow my career would not be complete until we got back to that and finished it. Now that's actually happening. Now that I'm actually able to return to it, that Neil and I are working together again, that we are actually finishing this thing, that's gone. And so now what's happening is that there's a lot of the little projects, the graphic novels and the things that I've got in the drawers here that were plots and drawings that were always meant to be the projects that would come later on, are all starting to gain weight and resonance. And there's certainly things that I've had in that drawer from dating back to when I started on Fables that I still think I must get this thing drawn, I must get this thing out. But I don't think I have one story that has to be told. I think the thing with me is that whenever inspiration comes all the time and from unexpected sources. So if I was to say there was, and you spoke to me again in 6 months' time, something else would have come up that was now the best thing I've ever come up with, and the thing I must do. And I do have a project that that sort of came to me last year that is pottering away in the background that I really desperately need to do. And if anything, it's benefiting from the fact that I know I have Miracleman and a couple of other big projects that are coming on the heels of that that will get me through the next 2 years, that for me will give me the headspace that I need to be able to fine tune that so that when it does come out, it's the best it can possibly be. But the reality is I've got a mortgage to pay till I'm 70. So I'm definitely not retiring for another 16 years. And I don't think I'm going to be stopping after that either. I mean, the reality is that I turned my hobby into a career, and even if I get to an age where I don't have much energy left to do, to create a lot, I'm still going to want to draw. I'm still going to want to paint. I'm still going to come up with ideas for stories, and that is not going to go away. It might be taken from me, sadly, I might not be able to see to be able to draw anymore. I might not have my mind anymore to be able to focus on being creative. But as long as the tools are there for me to be able to still be creative in some form, that is what I will do. I mean, one of the things that's been useful for me in the last few years is I've broadened the remit of what it is I do and how I communicate with the world. So, the fact that I've now moved more into painting, that I'm writing more so that I feel that, I can work on words. It doesn't have to be reliant on pictures, that I'm also, singing and composing. So I have another avenue that's not reliant on the hand and the eyes. All of those things I think are important to me because I'm trying to give myself the maximum number of opportunities to continue to pursue some sort of creative endeavor for as long as I'm able to.
I think that's in a way, in a strange related way, really close to the answer that Pete Milligan, which I think is the best answer I got in the show every time I ask this question. I think Pete was the best answer. When he asked me, he literally said, what I'm doing now, because why waiting? It's always my project that has always been nagging me is the one that I can produce.
Yes.
Because, as you said, is the next idea that is going to come is going to be the best idea for you.
Yeah. You have to believe that, because if you don't, then there's no point doing anything. It's the same with my art. If I ever felt that I was perfect, if I ever felt that I produced something that was the best I was capable of, why would I ever pick up a pencil again?
Yeah.
You've got nowhere to go from there. But thankfully, I'm so riddled with neuroses and fears and questioning everything I do all the time and pushing myself all the time to find another way of doing things, to find that story that I haven't told yet that means something to me. I'm striving for another way to talk to people and communicate with people. I can't stop. I won't be able to stop. You know, it's
It's the daily life of an artist, just struggling neurosis, and keep thinking, oh my God, what's this? Next one, he's going to do it better, right? Anyway, guys, this guy has a life, and I want to it. I have a life too. His life is better, but I have a life too.
You'll have a wonderful life as well.
So, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Mark, for being here.
Well, thank you, everyone, for 2 hours and 20 minutes worth of me rambling on.
It was amazing. Please don't cut, because I want to say proper goodbye to you after we cut the live feed.
All right.
To all of you, wear your mask. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
And tomorrow with us, mañana con nosotros, Enrique Alcatena, Kike Alcatena, y Ariel Olivetti. Have fun. Again, wear your mask. Thank you.